He was 3 months behind on rent, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big, and holding the hand of a sick little girl he couldn't afford to lose. They told him he was expired goods. They laughed at his resume gap, but 20 minutes later that same single dad was the only person in the room who knew how to stop a billion-dollar company from burning to the ground. This isn't just a story about getting a job. It's about how Ethan Wright walked into a lion's den, saved the Queen, and reminded the world that a father's love is the most dangerous skill set of all. You need to hear this. The alarm didn't ring. It didn't have to. Ethan Wright had been staring at the ceiling since 4 a.m., watching the shadows of the rain slide down the peeling paint of his bedroom wall. Beside him, in a makeshift cot pushed against the radiator, 6-year-old Lily wheezed. It was a wet, rattling sound that tightened Ethan's chest like a vice every time he heard it. The nebulizer on the nightstand was empty. The prescription refill was sitting at the pharmacy down on 4th Street, hostage to a $45 copay he didn't have until Friday. Ethan sat up, the springs of the mattress groaning. He looked at his hands. They were calloused now, rough, from 6 months of working night shifts at an Amazon warehouse, loading pallets until his back screamed. They didn't look like the hands of a senior systems architect anymore. They didn't look like the hands of a man who had once optimized supply chains for Fortune 500 companies. "Daddy?" Ethan snapped his head toward the cot. Lily was blinking up at him, her pale blue eyes watery. "I'm here, Lil Bit. I'm here." He smoothed the hair back from her forehead. She was warm. Too warm. "Is today the big day?" she whispered, her voice raspy. Ethan forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, but was enough to fool a 6-year-old. "It is. The biggest. Sterling Dynamics. If Daddy gets this job, we get the apartment with the balcony, the one where you can see the park. And the medicine?" "And the medicine," Ethan choked out. "All of it." He got up and walked to the closet. Inside hung a single garment bag. He unzipped it carefully, revealing a charcoal grey suit. It was a Brooks Brothers suit, bought 4 years ago for his anniversary dinner with Sarah. Before the cancer. Before the hospital bills ate the savings. Before the grief made him step away from the corporate world to hold his dying wife's hand, and then his grieving daughter's. He put it on. The waist was loose. He'd lost 20 pounds living on ramen and stress, but the shoulders still held. He tied his tie with practiced precision, the muscle memory of his old life flooding back. He looked in the mirror. He saw the grey in his beard, the dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look like a dynamic self-starter. He looked like a survivor. "You look like a movie star," Lily said from the cot. Ethan turned, scooping her up, ignoring the ache in his lower back. "And you look like a princess who needs to stay with Mrs. Higgins today. No running, okay?" Dropping her off at the neighbor's apartment down the hall was the hardest part. Mrs. Higgins was kind, but her apartment smelled of mothballs and cat litter, and Ethan hated leaving Lily there. But he had no choice. "I'll be back by 2, Ethan promised, kissing Lily's forehead, "with good news." He walked out into the biting Chicago wind. He didn't have money for an Uber. He barely had money for the subway. He walked 6 blocks to the train, clutching a leather portfolio that contained the only thing he had left to sell, his mind. Sterling Dynamics wasn't just an office. It was a monument to intimidation. Located in the heart of the Loop, the building was 70 stories of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the grey sky. Ethan checked in at the front desk. The receptionist, a young man with a headset and a look of permanent boredom, didn't even look up as he took Ethan's ID. "Right, you're early. 10 a.m. slot with Mr. Holt." "I wanted to be prompt," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Sit over there. Don't block the hallway." Ethan sat on a leather bench that probably cost more than his last 3 cars combined. He watched the employees stream in. They were young, painfully young, men in slim-fit suits with smartwatches, women in sharp blazers holding Starbucks cups. They moved with a frenetic energy, talking about KPIs and scalability and disrupting the market. Ethan felt like a ghost haunting the future. At 10:15, a woman in a severe black dress approached him. "Mr. Wright, Braden Holt will see you now." She led him through a maze of open-plan desks to a corner office. The walls were glass. Everything was visible. Braden Holt was sitting behind a desk made of reclaimed wood, typing on a phone. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hand. He looked to be about 28, with slicked-back hair and a smile that looked like it had been sharpened on a whetstone. "Ethan, right," Braden said, finally tossing the phone onto the desk. He picked up Ethan's resume, holding it by the corner as if it were contaminated. "Impressive history here. MIT grad, lead architect at Omnicorp." "But," Braden paused for effect, tapping a manicured finger on the paper, "there's a hole here, Ethan. A big, ugly 2-year hole. 2024 to present. What happened? Did you decide to go find yourself in Bali? Rehab?" Ethan stiffened. "My wife passed away. I took time off to care for her and raise my daughter." Braden's expression didn't change. No sympathy. Just a slight twitch of the nose. "Right. Personal reasons. Look, Ethan, I'll be honest. Sterling Dynamics is a sprint. We move fast. We break things. We need people who live and breathe code. People who are hungry." He looked Ethan up and down, his eyes lingering on the slightly frayed cuff of Ethan's shirt. "You've been out of the game for 2 years. In this industry, that's a decade. The tech stack has changed. The culture has changed." "I've kept up," Ethan said, leaning forward. "I code at night. I follow the market. And frankly, Mr. Holt, experience isn't about knowing the newest acronym. It's about knowing what to do when the new acronym fails." Braden chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Cute. But we're looking for a culture fit. We need energy. We need fresh perspectives. Honestly, you seem tired." Ethan felt the anger flare, hot and sharp. "I am tired. I'm a single father, but I am also the man who built the logistics network that Omnicorp still uses today. I solve problems, Mr. Holt. That's what I do." Braden stood up, buttoning his jacket. The interview was over. "We're looking for the future, Ethan. Not the past. Thank you for coming in." He gestured to the door. Ethan stood there for a second, the rejection washing over him. It wasn't just a no. It was a dismissal of his existence. He thought of Lily's nebulizer. He thought of the rent notice. "You're making a mistake," Ethan said quietly. "I doubt it." Braden smirked. "Security is downstairs. They'll see you out." Ethan walked out of Braden's office, his legs feeling like lead. He felt the eyes of the young staff on him as he passed. The has-been, the old man. He pressed the button for the elevator, fighting the urge to punch the pristine glass wall. He stepped into the elevator car. The doors began to slide shut. Screech! A piercing alarm ripped through the building. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a digital shriek, the sound of a server room going into critical meltdown. The elevator jolted and stopped. The lights flickered and turned red. Through the glass doors of the elevator, Ethan could see the office floor he had just left erupt into chaos. The young employees who looked so confident moments ago were now scrambling. Phones were ringing off the hook. Screens were flashing red. Ethan hit the open door button. Nothing. He pried the doors open with his hands, stepping back out onto the floor. "What's happening?" Ethan grabbed the arm of a passing junior developer. "Everything's down," the kid yelled, panic in his eyes. "The global migration, it crashed. The fail-safes aren't triggering. We're losing 40,000 transactions a second." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He looked at the massive dashboard on the wall. It was a sea of red error codes. Error 509. Database deadlock. Cascading failure. Braden Holt was running out of his office, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He was screaming at a phone. "What do you mean you can't stop it? Just unplug it. I don't care, just make it stop." And then, the double doors at the end of the hall burst open. A woman strode in. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She was tall, wearing a white power suit that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. This was Seraphina Sterling, the CEO, the Ice Queen of Chicago Tech. She didn't look panicked. She looked furious. "Braden!" Her voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Why are my shareholders calling me, telling me our stock just dropped 4 points in 2 minutes?" "Seraphina," Braden stammered, holding his hands up. It's a glitch. The vendor update. It reacted with the legacy core. We're trying to roll back, but the system is locked." "How much are we losing?" she demanded, stepping closer to him. I don't know exactly. $2 million a minute," a voice said from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Ethan stood there, his portfolio tucked under his arm. He was looking at the main screen, reading the cascading code that was scrolling too fast for anyone else to track. "Who the hell is this?" Seraphina asked, her eyes locking onto Ethan. They were green, sharp, and terrifying. "He's a reject," Braden snapped, trying to regain control. "Security, get him out of here. We have a crisis." "Wait," Seraphina held up a hand. She looked at Ethan. "How do you know that number?" "Because I know this architecture," Ethan said, walking past the security guard who had started to approach him. He pointed at the screen. "You're running a modified version of the Helios protocol. It was built for stability, not speed. You tried to push a high-frequency trading update on top of a legacy foundation without clearing the cache buffers." He looked Seraphina dead in the eye. "Your system isn't glitching, Miss Sterling. It's choking to death. And in about 3 minutes, the thermal fail-safes will trigger and wipe your entire customer database to save the hardware." The room went silent. "He's lying," Braden shouted. "He's just some unemployed guy I kicked out." Seraphina looked at Braden, then back at Ethan. She saw the cheap suit. She saw the exhaustion. But she also saw the calm. "Can you stop it?" she asked. "I can," Ethan said, "but I need terminal access, root privileges. Now. Absolutely not." Braden blocked the way to the main console. "Seraphina, you cannot let a stranger touch the core. It's a security violation." Seraphina looked at the screen. The red bars were rising. "Braden," she said, her voice icy. "Move, or you're fired." Braden froze. He stepped aside, his face twisting with humiliation. Ethan dropped his portfolio on the floor. He sat down at the main terminal. The chair was warm from the previous operator. He cracked his knuckles. "Don't worry," Ethan muttered, mostly to himself. "Daddy's got this." His fingers hit the keys. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic, machine gun clatter of mechanical keys. Ethan didn't look at the keyboard. His eyes were glued to the massive central monitor, which was currently a terrifying wall of cascading red text. "System core temperature, critical, data corruption, 78%, 79%. "It's not working," Braden hissed, hovering over Ethan's shoulder like a vulture. "He's just typing gibberish. Seraphina, pull the plug before he wipes the backups." "Quiet," Seraphina commanded, her voice low and dangerous. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was watching Ethan's hands. She had seen fast coders before, kids fresh out of Stanford who could type at the speed of thought. But this was different. This wasn't frantic. It was musical. It was a conductor bringing a chaotic orchestra to a sudden, violent halt. Ethan ignored them. In his mind, the glass office, the arrogant 20-something boss, and the Ice Queen CEO didn't exist. There was only the logic of the code. He saw the problem immediately. The new update Braden had pushed was trying to rewrite the database headers in real time, but the old legacy system was treating those rewrites as hostile attacks and locking the doors. It was a digital civil war. "Come on," Ethan whispered, sweat prickling on his forehead. "Talk to me." He bypassed the user interface entirely, dropping into the raw command line. The black box opened. "Pseudo service Helios, stop." "Error. Process locked by root." "It's locked," one of the junior developers gasped from the crowd. "You can't stop it." "I'm not trying to stop it," Ethan muttered. "I'm trying to trick it." He began typing a script from scratch. It was a risky maneuver, a Trojan horse patch that would tell the legacy system that the update was actually a scheduled maintenance drill. If it worked, the system would pause to log the drill. If it failed, the server would interpret it as a virus and fry the hard drives instantly. Data corruption, 88%. "That's it!" Braden lunged forward. "Security, drag him!" "Touch me," Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave. "And this company loses $4 billion in 10 seconds. Braden froze, his hand inches from Ethan's shoulder. The sheer authority in Ethan's voice, the voice of a father who had stared down doctors and debt collectors, stopped him cold. Ethan hit the enter key. The screen froze. The red text stopped scrolling. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The hum of the server fans seemed to deafen the room. Then the text turned green. System status paused. Cache buffer clearing. Rollback initiated. A collective breath left the room. The red warning lights on the walls stopped flashing and returned to a steady, calming blue. Ethan leaned back in the chair, his hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. "The database is intact," Ethan said, his voice raspy. "I isolated the corrupt sectors. You lost the transactions from the last 4 minutes, but the customer data is safe. The bleeding has stopped." He stood up. His knees felt weak. He hadn't eaten since yesterday lunch, half a sandwich Lily hadn't finished. The room spun slightly. "Who?" the junior developer whispered, staring at Ethan with wide, worshipping eyes. "Who are you?" Ethan didn't answer. He picked up his portfolio from the floor. He looked at Braden, whose face had gone from pale to a blotchy, furious red. "I believe," Ethan said, dusting off his suit jacket, "that concludes my interview. As you said, Mr. Holt, I'm just an expired architect. I'll see myself out." He turned to leave. He had his dignity. That was all he had. But he would keep it. "Stop." Serafina Sterling's voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel. Ethan paused near the glass doors. Serafina walked slowly across the floor, her heels clicking on the polished concrete. She stopped in front of Braden. She was 3 inches shorter than him, but she seemed to tower over him. "Braden," she said pleasantly. "Serafina, look, I can explain," Braden stammered, sweating profusely. "The vendor promised me. Did you or did you not authorize a level 5 update on a live server during trading hours? We needed to show growth for the quarterly review. I was taking initiative." "You were gambling with my company," she said, her expression hardening into diamond-edged coldness. "Get out of my sight. Go to your office. Don't touch a computer. Don't touch a phone. If you leave the building, I will have you arrested for corporate negligence." Braden opened his mouth, closed it, and then slunk away, casting a venomous look at Ethan as he passed. Serafina turned to Ethan. The coldness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, assessing intelligence. "Mr. Wright," she said, "please step into my office." Serafina's office was a sanctuary of silence high above the city noise. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, but Ethan couldn't focus on it. His stomach growled loudly. Serafina walked to a wet bar in the corner, poured a glass of sparkling water, and set it on the desk. She also placed a bowl of fresh green apples between them. She had heard the growl. She didn't comment on it. It was a grace note Ethan hadn't expected. "Sit," she said. Ethan sat. He took an apple. He tried to eat it slowly, but the hunger took over, and he finished half of it in 2 bites. "You saved us," Serafina said, sitting on the edge of her desk, crossing her arms. "Braden Holt is an idiot with an MBA and a rich father. He knows buzzwords. You know the machine." "He's not the only one," Ethan said, wiping his mouth. "The industry is full of them now. They want speed, not stability." "I see that," Serafina nodded. She picked up his resume, which Braden had left crumpled on the front desk. She smoothed it out on the glass surface. Ethan Wright, senior architect, 2-year gap. She looked up. Why did Braden dismiss you? He said I was expired goods, Ethan said flatly. Said I didn't have the energy for Sterling Dynamics. Serafina let out a short, incredulous laugh. He nearly burned the building down with his energy. I prefer your competence. She pulled a drawer open and took out a thick, cream-colored contract. She slid it across the desk. I don't need an architect, Ethan. I have plenty of those. I need a crisis manager. I need someone who can look at the mess Braden has made of my back-end infrastructure and fix it before the shareholders realize how close we came to dying today. Ethan looked at the paper. Head of Infrastructure Security. The salary figure listed made his breath catch in his throat. It was more than he had made at Omnicorp. It was enough to pay the rent, the debts, the medical bills, and buy the apartment with the view. But then he looked at the date. Start date, immediate. I can't start today, Ethan said, pushing the paper back slightly. Serafina frowned. Why? You have another offer? No, Ethan said, looking down at his hands. I have a daughter, Lily. She's 6. She's sick. I have to pick her up in 2 hours. And to be honest with you, Miss Sterling. He paused. This was the moment where he lost the job. This was where he admitted he was broken. I can't afford the commute until I get paid, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I walked here. I don't have the money for the prescription she needs tonight. If I start, I need help. Today. The silence stretched. Ethan waited for the look of pity or disgust. Serafina stood up. She walked around the desk. She didn't look at him with pity. She looked at him with something else. Recognition. She opened her checkbook. She wrote quickly, tore out the check, and handed it to him. Ethan looked at it. It was for $5,000. This is a signing bonus, Serafina said firmly. It is not a loan. It is yours. Go get your daughter's medicine. Go pay your rent. Buy a suit that fits you. Ethan stared at the check, his vision blurring. He blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this woman. Thank you, he choked out. Don't thank me, Serafina said, her voice businesslike again. Earn it. Be here tomorrow at 8 a.m. I'm going to fire Braden, and the fallout is going to be messy. I need you on my side, Ethan. I'll be here, Ethan promised. Good, now go, before the rain starts again. Ethan stood up, clutching the check like a lifeline. He walked to the door, feeling lighter than he had in 2 years. Oh, and Ethan? Serafina called out just as his hand touched the door handle. He turned. Braden is vindictive, she warned, her eyes dark. He's the son of Senator Holt. He doesn't take losing well. Watch your back. I've handled worse than a spoiled brat, Ethan said. I hope so, Serafina replied softly. Because he's going to try to destroy you. Ethan didn't walk to the pharmacy. He took a taxi. He watched the city blur by, the check burning a hole in his pocket. He stopped at the pharmacy first. He bought the nebulizer refills, the antibiotics, and a bottle of children's vitamins shaped like gummy bears. Then he went to the bakery next door and bought 2 chocolate cupcakes with pink frosting. When he got to Mrs. Higgins' apartment, Lily was sitting on the floor, coughing. She looked up, her eyes tired. Daddy, she rasped. Did you get the job? Ethan dropped to his knees. He pulled the medicine out of the bag. Then the cupcakes. I got the job, lil bit, he said, pulling her into a hug, burying his face in her small, warm neck. We got everything. For the first time in forever, Ethan Wright didn't feel like he was drowning. But he didn't know that across town, in a penthouse apartment, Braden Holt was smashing a glass of scotch against the wall, screaming Ethan's name. The war had just begun. The rain in Chicago had turned relentless, battering the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Sterling Dynamics headquarters like shrapnel. But inside the server room, the atmosphere was warm, almost buzzing with a newfound electric harmony. It had been 3 weeks since the Great Crash, as the staff had started calling it. In that time, Ethan Wright had done the impossible. He hadn't just patched the system, he had evolved it. The chaotic, tangled mess of code that Braden Holt had left behind was gone, replaced by an infrastructure that hummed with the elegance of a symphony. Ethan sat at the head of the conference table, a lukewarm coffee in his hand. He looked different. The hollowed-out cheeks were filling in. The suit he wore was new, a deep navy blue that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, but the biggest change was in his eyes. The haunted, desperate look of a man watching his daughter fade away was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. "So," Ethan said, pointing to the projection screen where complex data streams flowed in calming green lines. "If we reroute the API calls through the secondary buffer, we reduce latency by 40%. It's not just stable, Toby. It's fast." Toby, the young junior developer, who had once looked at Ethan like he was a dinosaur, now nodded with furious admiration. "I didn't think the legacy core could handle that kind of throughput, Mr. Wright. It's honestly genius." "It's not genius, Toby. It's just listening to what the machine wants," Ethan smiled. He checked his watch. 2:45 p.m. In 15 minutes, he would leave to pick up Lily. Today was a special day. It was the first day she had gone to school without her heavy coat, and she had run into the classroom without looking back. Mrs. Higgins had texted him a photo earlier. Lily laughing on the playground, her cheeks flush with health, not fever. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had done it. He had pulled them back from the edge of the abyss. He had the job, the respect, and most importantly, the future. He was safe. The elevator dinged. It wasn't the soft, polite chime that usually announced a coffee delivery or a visiting client. It was a sharp, repetitive alert that signaled a security override. The heavy glass doors of the department slid open with a violent hiss. Silence swept across the room like a cold wind. Toby stopped typing. The chatter at the water cooler died instantly. Braden Holt walked in. He didn't look like the panicked, sweating boy who had been escorted out 3 weeks ago. He was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Ethan's car. His hair was perfectly coiffed, and his face held a terrifying, brittle composure. He looked like a man who had not only recovered from a fall, but had brought a sledgehammer to ensure no one else remained standing. Behind him were 4 uniformed Chicago police officers, their hands resting on their holsters, and a man in a trench coat who radiated the weary, cynical authority of a detective who had seen everything. "Everyone away from the terminals," Braden shouted, his voice cracking like a whip across the open floor. "Hands where we can see them, now!" "What is the meaning of this?" Ethan stood up slowly, placing his coffee cup down on the table with deliberate care. He felt a cold prickle of dread at the base of his spine. This wasn't a corporate visit. This was a raid. "Ethan Wright," Braden said, savoring the name as if it were a piece of candy. He pointed a manicured finger directly at Ethan's chest. "That is the man. Detective, do your job." The man in the trench coat stepped forward, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. "Whoa. Ethan Wright, I'm Detective Miller, Financial Crimes Division. You are under arrest." "Arrest?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "For what?" "Fixing your client's mess. For grand larceny, corporate espionage, and 18 counts of wire fraud," Miller recited, his voice flat and bored. The words hung in the air, absurd and heavy. "That's insane," Toby blurted out, standing up to defend his mentor. "Mr. Wright saved this company. He's the only reason the servers are running." "Sit down, kid, before I charge you with obstruction," Miller snapped. At that moment, the door to the CEO's office flew open. Serafina Sterling stormed out, her heels striking the floor with the cadence of a machine gun. She looked furious, her eyes blazing. "Braden!" she yelled, ignoring the police. "I told security you were banned from the premises. If you and your father's lawyers think you can intimidate me with a show of force, you are sorely mistaken. Get out of my building before I have you thrown out." Braden didn't flinch. He just smiled. a slow, reptilian stretching of his lips. "I'm not here for you, Serafina," Braden said smoothly. "I'm here to save you again." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents, bound with a red clip. He tossed them onto the desk in front of Ethan. "Go ahead, Ethan," Braden sneered. Tell her how you did it." Ethan looked at the papers. The header read, "Independent Forensic Audit Holt and Associates." "I don't know what this is," Ethan said, his voice steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Don't you?" Braden laughed, walking around the desk to address the room. It was a masterful con, really. I admit, even I was fooled. The sad single dad act. The expired genius routine. It was perfect cover. Braden turned to Serafina, his voice dropping to a mock sympathetic whisper. "We audited the patch he installed, Serafina. The miracle code that stopped the crash? It wasn't a fix. It was a tunnel." "A tunnel?" Serafina frowned, looking from Braden to Ethan. "A logic bomb," Braden explained, gesturing to the papers, "embedded in the root directory. Every time a transaction is processed, the script shaves off 0.05% and redirects it. It's invisible to the standard firewall, but not to a forensic deep dive." "That's a lie," Ethan said, stepping forward. "My code is clean. It's open source. Anyone can check it." "We did check it," Detective Miller interrupted. He tapped a page in the report. "We traced the redirected funds. $2 million, deposited into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 3 days ago. The account holder is registered as Ethan Wright." "I don't have an offshore account," Ethan shouted, the desperation finally bleeding into his voice. "I barely have a checking account." "And the kicker?" Braden interrupted, his eyes gleaming with malice. "The IP address used to set up the transfer matches the router in your apartment, the one Sterling Dynamics pays for." Ethan froze. The room seemed to tilt. The IP address, the account name. It was a frame job. A perfect, airtight frame job. Braden hadn't just been sulking for 3 weeks. He had been building a gallows. Serafina picked up the report. Her hands were trembling slightly. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the lines of data. "Ethan," she whispered, not looking up, "did you write this subroutine? The Helios_redirect?" "No," Ethan pleaded, looking at her. "Serafina, look at me. You know me. I sat in your office. I told you I just wanted to pay for my daughter's medicine. Why would I steal $2 million when you gave me everything I needed?" "Because greed doesn't have a limit," Braden shouted. "And he played you, Serafina. He saw a rich, desperate CEO, and he took you for a ride. He crashed the system in the first place, just so he could walk in here and play hero." Serafina looked up. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of horror and confusion. The evidence on the paper looked irrefutable. It was technical, precise, and damning. She looked at Ethan. For a heartbeat, he saw it. The doubt. It was a small crack in her armor, but it shattered him. She wasn't sure. The trust they had built over late-night coffees and strategy sessions was buckling under the weight of Braden's lies. I can't interfere with a police investigation if the evidence is valid," Serafina said, her voice barely audible. She stepped back, putting distance between them. That step back hurt more than the handcuffs Detective Miller slapped onto Ethan's wrists. Click! The sound was deafening in the silent office. "Ethan Wright, you have the right to remain silent." Miller began the Mirandization, spinning Ethan around and shoving him toward the elevator. The humiliation was absolute. Ethan was marched past the desks of the people he had led. Toby looked down at his shoes, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. The whispers started immediately, like venom spreading through water. I knew it was too good to be true. He was a criminal all along. Braden walked beside them as they reached the elevator. He leaned in close, so close that Ethan could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "You should have stayed expired, old man," Braden whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "You embarrassed me. You took my office. You made me look like a fool in front of my father. Did you really think I'd let you keep it?" "I didn't do it, Braden," Ethan gritted out, struggling against the cuffs. "The logs will prove it." "The logs are rewritten," Braden grinned. "My team is very thorough, but that's not the worst part, is it?" The elevator doors opened. Braden blocked the sensor with his hand, keeping them open for one last moment of torture. "You're a single father, Ethan. No next of kin, no wife. And now you're a felon facing 20 years in federal prison." Braden checked his watch. "School gets out in 10 minutes, doesn't it? Who picks her up when Daddy is in a holding cell?" Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Don't you bring her into this." "Oh, it's already done," Braden said, his eyes dead and cold. "I made a call to Child Protective Services an hour ago. Anonymous tip about an unstable home environment, funded by criminal activity. They're waiting at the school gates, Ethan. Little Lily is going into the system, and with your record, you'll never see her again." A primal roar ripped from Ethan's throat. He surged forward, leading with his shoulder, slamming into Braden's chest. Braden stumbled back, gasping, but the officers were on Ethan instantly. They slammed him into the elevator wall, hard enough to see stars. "Get him out of here!" Braden screeched, straightening his tie, his face flushed with adrenaline. "And make sure the press gets the mug shot." The doors closed, sealing Ethan inside with the police. The ride down to the lobby was a blur of grey steel and panic. Ethan couldn't breathe. He didn't care about the money. He didn't care about the prison time. All he could see was Lily standing at the school gate, holding her little pink backpack, scanning the crowd for the father who promised he would never leave her again. He saw the black car of the social workers pulling up. He saw the confusion on her face turning to terror. He had fixed the machine. He had saved the company. But he had failed the only job that ever mattered. As the officers dragged him through the lobby, past the staring receptionist and out into the pouring rain, Ethan Wright didn't look like a savior. He looked like a broken man. He was shoved into the back of the squad car. The cage separated him from the world. As the siren wailed to life, cutting through the Chicago traffic, Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold glass and let the first tear fall. Braden had won. The game was rigged. But as the city blurred past, a single, cold thought solidified in the wreckage of Ethan's mind. Braden had made a mistake. He thought he had buried a corporate rival. He didn't realize he had just declared war on a father, and a father with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous architect of all. The interrogation room at the 1st District Precinct was a box of concrete and silence, designed to break men who had something to hide. But for Ethan Wright, it was just another cage. He sat handcuffed to the metal table, the steel biting into his wrists, staring at the one-way mirror. It had been 4 hours. They had taken his phone. They had taken his belt and his shoelaces. But the only thing they had taken that mattered was his hope. "You might as well talk, right?" Detective Miller said, leaning against the grey wall, looking tired. "The forensic accounting team is already tearing your life apart. We know about the account in the Caymans. We know about the script. If you confess, maybe the judge goes easy on you. Maybe you get to see your kid before she turns 18. Ethan didn't look up. He felt a dull, thrumming ache in his chest. "I didn't do it. They all say that." "I didn't do it," Ethan repeated, his voice cracking. "Is she safe? Please just tell me if Lily is safe." Miller sighed, opening his mouth to speak, but the heavy steel door buzzed and swung open. Ethan expected a lawyer, or maybe a social worker coming to deliver the final blow. Instead, the room seemed to shrink as 3 figures walked in. First was Seraphina Sterling. She looked pale, her usual iron composure fractured. She held a file folder against her chest like a shield. Behind her was Braden Holt. He was beaming, practically vibrating with the thrill of his victory. And behind Braden, radiating a cold, terrifying authority, was Senator William Holt. The senator was a man who could end careers with a phone call, and he looked at Ethan with the same disdain one might reserve for a cockroach. What is this? Miller straightened up. This is a closed interrogation. I'm dropping the charges, Serafina said, her voice trembling slightly. She threw the file onto the table. It slid across the metal surface, stopping inches from Ethan's hands. You can't drop these charges, Miss Sterling, Miller said, confused. This is a state matter now. Grand larceny. It's not larceny if it's a mistake, Serafina said, though she didn't sound convinced. She looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading. Braden. Braden says if you sign a confession admitting to the hacking, he'll convince the board to decline prosecution. You'll just face probation. You can go home to Lily tonight. Ethan looked at Braden. The younger man stepped forward, leaning his hands on the table. It's a generous offer, Ethan, Braden whispered, his smile sharp and cruel. Sign the paper. Admit you're a thief. You lose your reputation, sure, but you keep your freedom. You keep the girl. Or fight it. Go to prison. And Lily grows up in a foster home, wondering why Daddy left her. It was a trap. A perfect, vicious trap. If Ethan signed, Braden was cleared of everything, and Ethan was branded a criminal for life. If he didn't sign, he lost his daughter. You sick son of a bitch, Ethan whispered. Language, Senator Holt barked from the back. My son is offering you a lifeline, Mr. Wright. I suggest you take it. I won't have the Sterling name, or my investment, dragged through a lengthy trial. Ethan looked down at the confession. The pen was right there. He thought of Lily waiting at the CPS office. He reached for the pen. His hand shook. Just sign it. Save her. But then Ethan's eyes caught something. Not on the paper, but in his memory. He thought about the code. He thought about the machine. Machines didn't lie. People did. He dropped the pen. No, Ethan said. What? Braden's smile faltered. Don't be an idiot, Ethan. This is your only way out. I didn't steal the money, Ethan said, his voice gaining strength. He looked up, locking eyes with Serafina. And I can prove it. We have the logs, Ethan, Braden shouted, losing his cool. The IP matches, the timestamp matches. You have the OS logs, Ethan said calmly. Operating system logs can be spoofed. Timestamps can be edited. Any first-year CS student knows that. He turned his body as much as the cuffs allowed, facing the mirror. Toby, Ethan shouted at the glass. The room went silent. Who are you talking to? Miller asked. I know you're out there, Toby, Ethan yelled. You followed Serafina here, didn't you? Get in here. Bring the laptop. There was a commotion in the hallway. A moment later the door opened again. A terrified young man in a hoodie stumbled in, clutching a battered laptop. It was Toby, the junior developer. He looked like he was about to faint, but he walked straight to the table. I tried to tell them, Mr. Wright, Toby stammered, but Mr. Holt locked us out of the system. Toby, Ethan said, his voice laser-focused, connect to the Sterling mainframe, but don't use the admin portal. You can't, Braden laughed nervously. I revoked all your credentials. Use the kernel tap, Ethan commanded. Port 8080, the shadow drive. Braden's face went white. The what? When I fixed your mess 3 weeks ago, Braden, Ethan said, his eyes hard. I didn't just patch the database. I installed a black box recorder at the kernel level. It's a redundancy feature. It records every single keystroke, every command, and every connection request made to the server. And unlike the OS logs, it's read only. It cannot be edited. Not by me, not by you, not by God himself. That's a bluff, Braden stammered, looking at his father. Dad, he's bluffing. There's no such thing. Toby, Ethan said, run the query for the embezzlement script. Helios_redirect. Toby typed furiously. The silence in the room was suffocating. Senator Holt stepped closer, his brow furrowed. Got it, Toby breathed. He spun the laptop around. On the screen was a stream of raw code. Read the metadata, Toby, loudly. Script created, Helios_redirect.exe, Toby read, his voice shaking. Creation date, November 12th, 3 months ago. Ethan looked at Serafina. I wasn't even employed there 3 months ago. Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Wait, Toby continued. I see the execution command from yesterday. The one that framed Mr. Wright. It says the command was sent from user admin_B_Holt. That's a lie, Braden shrieked. He hacked my account. He spoofed my ID. And, Toby cut in, the black box records the physical MAC address of the device that sent the command. It wasn't Mr. Wright's router. Toby pointed to a string of numbers on the screen. It matches the device currently connected to the precinct Wi-Fi, labeled Braden's iPhone 15 Pro. The air left the room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the metal cuffs clinking. You didn't even use a burner phone, Braden. You framed me for grand larceny using the phone in your pocket? Slowly, every head in the room turned toward Braden Holt. Braden was backing away, sweat pouring down his face. No, it's a glitch. The system is wrong. Dad, tell them. Tell them who I am. Senator Holt stared at the screen. Then he looked at his son. The senator's face turned a shade of purple that was terrifying to behold. He didn't look like a protective father anymore. He looked like a man watching his legacy burn to ash. You stole from me, Senator Holt whispered. It wasn't a question. You embezzled from the company I chair, and then you used my lawyers to frame an innocent man to cover your incompetence. I needed the money, Dad. The bookies, they were going to— Smack! The sound of the slap echoed like a gunshot. Braden stumbled back, clutching his cheek, stunned silence filling the room. You are finished, Senator Holt hissed, his voice trembling with rage. I am cutting you off. No lawyers, no trust fund, nothing. The senator turned to Detective Miller. Detective, I would like to file charges against my son for embezzlement and filing a false police report. No! Braden screamed, tears streaming down his face as Miller moved toward him. You can't do this. I'm a Holt. Serafina, help me. Serafina stepped forward. She didn't look at Braden. She looked at Detective Miller. I'm pressing charges too, she said, her voice like ice. Corporate sabotage, identity theft, and whatever the maximum is for trying to destroy a family. As Miller clicked the handcuffs onto Braden's wrists, the very same handcuffs Ethan had worn moments ago, Braden collapsed into a sobbing mess, begging his father for mercy. The senator turned his back on him and walked out of the room without a word. Serafina rushed to the table. She fumbled with the keys Miller had tossed down, unlocking Ethan's cuffs. Ethan, she choked out, grabbing his hands. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have trusted you. Ethan rubbed his raw wrists. He didn't care about the apology. He didn't care about Braden being dragged out the door. Where is she? Ethan asked, standing up. Where is Lily? She's in the lobby, Serafina said, tears in her eyes. Mrs. Higgins called me. She refused to let the social workers take her until I got there. My driver is watching them. Ethan didn't wait. He ran. He sprinted out of the interrogation room, down the hallway, ignoring the startled officers. He burst through the double doors into the precinct lobby. And there she was, sitting on a hard plastic chair, clutching her pink backpack, looking small and terrified, was Lily. A stern-looking woman with a clipboard was standing over her. Daddy! Lily screamed the word, jumping off the chair. Ethan hit his knees, sliding across the linoleum floor, catching her just as she launched herself into his arms. He buried his face in her hair, smelling the strawberry shampoo and the rain. She was shaking. He was shaking. I've got you, he whispered fiercely, crushing her to his chest. I've got you, Lil Bit. I'm never letting go, never. The bad man said you weren't coming back, she sobbed into his shoulder. The bad man was wrong, Ethan said, lifting his head. He looked at the social worker, his eyes blazing with a protective fire that made her take a step back. She's coming home. Now. Serafina appeared behind him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. She handed the social worker a piece of paper, the dismissal of charges. He's right, Serafina said. They're going home. 6 months later. The summer breeze off Lake Michigan was warm and sweet. Ethan Wright stood on the balcony of the penthouse apartment. Not just any apartment, but the one he had bought with his signing bonus as the new Chief Technology Officer of Sterling Dynamics. He took a sip of his beer, looking out at the skyline. The city looked different from up here. It looked conquerable. "Checkmate," Ethan turned around. On the patio table, Lily was grinning triumphantly. Across from her, Serafina Sterling groaned, tipping over her king. "How does a 7-year-old beat me every time?" Serafina laughed, shaking her head. "She has her father's logic," Ethan smiled, walking over to join them. Lily looked healthy. Her cheeks were round and pink, her eyes bright and mischievous. The nebulizer was packed away in a closet, gathering dust. Serafina stood up and walked over to Ethan. She rested her hand on his arm, a gesture that had become familiar and warm over the last few months. "You know," she said softly, "the board is asking about the new security protocols. They want to name the system after you." "No," Ethan said, looking at his daughter, who was busy setting up the chess pieces for another game. "Name it Project Lily, because that's the only reason it exists." Ethan looked back at the view. He thought about the cold rain, the eviction notices, and the arrogant laugh of Braden Holt, who was currently serving the first year of a 10-year sentence in federal prison. Life had tried to break his code. It had thrown every error, every glitch, and every virus at him. But Ethan had done what any good father does. He didn't just debug the system. He rewrote the world for her. "Who wants pizza?" Ethan asked. "Me," Lily shouted, throwing her hands up. Ethan laughed, the sound echoing off the glass and steel of the city. It was the sound of a man who had won. And that, my friends, is the story of Ethan Wright. They told him he was expired. They told him he was a liability. But when the walls came crashing down, the single dad with a resume gap was the only one left standing. Braden Holt learned the hard way that you can buy a degree and you can buy a suit, but you cannot buy the resilience of a parent fighting for their child. Karma didn't just knock on Braden's door, it kicked it down and dragged him out in handcuffs. I hope this story reminded you that your current struggle is just a chapter, not the whole book. If you believe in the power of second chances and hard karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about justice served cold. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Braden's father, the senator, deserved to lose his reputation too? Or was he just another victim of his son's lies? Let me know in the comments below. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.